Okay, back for part two here in question time. Look, what we're going to do today is cover off on a few questions that we've received this week, but go back on some of those ones that we were a bit rushed on last week, John.
Yeah, we had the Nazis invade us, so we had to get out of there quick. It was a bit rushed, but we'll go back through and cover them because they're good questions, and so it's worth it.
And they demand more comprehensive answers, I think.
Yes.
Okay, so the first one's from Alex on Twitter. Apparently this one's directed at me.
Everyone knows I don't steak very well, Paul.
You don't like a good steak?
I like a too big a steak. I think my problem is I like the kilo steak, and sometimes the kilo steak's not required.
Indeed. Okay, so what Alex wants to know is whether or not the probabilities of proportional staking and betting to win 4% transfer into sports betting in line or total markets, where there are two sides that are both, say, $1.90. Look, I'm the first to admit that I know nothing about sport or sports betting. It's just something that I've never been interested or had the time.
It's got to be this. It's got to be the same.
But the point I was going to make was that if you feel that you've got an edge taking a price in the market, whether it's in a 2-horse race or in a 24-horse race, then you should be betting proportionally to collect a percentage of your bank. Now, look, I say 4% very generically. Plenty of other people say the same thing. Look, it could be, for me, depending on my confidence level, it's pretty much anything between like maybe 2 and 6.
Yeah, you'd say there's
extreme
more.
Probably more around the 5 mark would be common.
I get what he's saying. Like there'd be more variance in racing. You'd have more variance in your results. Because you're probably taking different odds to your $1.90. So if you bet in racing all the time and all you did was take $1.90, you should have a similar outcome to the sports, as in variance.
I would imagine so.
Well, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? Otherwise, you're in trouble. So, and if that's your max bet, your 4% or what you're always doing, it makes sense to me that it's exactly the same in racing. Throwing rocks, whatever. It doesn't matter what you're betting on.
It doesn't really matter what you're wagering on. At the end of the day,
it's what you're comfortable with, what you think is best to the way your edge or whatever. Everyone's different. If you're winning 50% on turnover, you can bet as hard as you want. You know what I mean? Like no one's doing it, but
I mean that's the point. Is that you first of all, I suppose, got to know that you've got an edge. But even if you're just betting, or even if you're just following tipping services or whatever it is, as long as you've got decent quality information, consistency is key. Not increasing your bets unnecessarily just because
over betting's very.
You think this thing's immoral, so instead of having you priced it at evens, if you're betting to collect
400 top bet, I'll have 1,000 on it because I'm winning 1,000, and if we have a good day, we have a good day or not. Which is
that's not the way.
Well, it's the same as having 1,000 on it to get out, or it's irrelevant. Like it's not irrelevant because it's at the end of the year. It really does affect you.
When you're not consistent, that's when this game has a way of punishing you.
It does, and it affects your psychology to approaching races. I remember someone that just funnily, I used to do a Perth the last few races as a bit of a joke more than anything because everyone's good or bad day, they want to have another bet or they're looking to get out, and someone on there it's sort of like, well, can you do the quaddy legs for Perth or whatever, so that at least we've got something to get out on. And you half don't want to do it to encourage people to bet that way, rather than not just look at it because it's laziness, but it's a bad way to look at things, really, whether it be the last 4 races at Perth or the last at Randwick as a more important race than any other race on the day.
You definitely can go into a race and have different confidence levels. If you're good at doing that and you're good at identifying which races you play much better, then it does make sense that if you're betting to collect, say, 4 or 5 or 6% of your bank, maybe in an extreme case, then you would have obviously closer to that bet where you've got maximum confidence, but where you're not confident, either don't bet or reduce your stake. Like if there's a reason to reduce your stake, conditions change on the day, you've done the form expecting pattern X and Y presents itself. You either stop betting totally in those situations, or you cut your bets right back. But certainly, confidence, I think, for most punters would be a fairly important ingredient in terms of determining your final bet size.
Yes, and when going back to Alex's question, I don't think price is relevant to adapting your percentage to win.
No,
it should be always about your edge over. So say you've got a $1.70, $1.90, and that qualifies for max bet. It's max bet. It's not irrelevant whether it's $21 and $4. It shouldn't make any difference. It's if they qualify for that certain percentage. they do.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's really proportional is just a derivative of a Kelly.
Yep.
A Kelly bet. So, you know, there's lots of things that you can read on the internet if you want to know more about that.
Get into 100% Kelly betting, and you'll live on the edge of your seat.
Yeah,
especially if like I seen Mark. I'm not having a go at Mark Lamborn the other day, but he marked won $999, and there was I think he marked $1.60 in the race, and like I was just thinking to myself, like Kelly, I'm less aggressive than that, and thinking, geez, if you full Kelly this, you'd be getting a bit excited. I think the $9.99 was backed into $6, and the other one was out to $5. I'll be thinking, Jesus, this is interesting race, and dead set not having a go at Mark. I don't even remember the result, but I just remember looking at the market thinking, if you were an aggressive punter here, well, then it's...
And look, it depends. If you're not experienced in doing markets, then my recommendation would be you bet to the market. You know, like the market's...
Well, it's got to have... You've got to at least overlay it, especially metropolitan Sydney, because they're so accurate, really. Even if you're placing 70% on your own and 30% on the late actual market.
We're talking about blending markets.
Then
you take a market.
Overlaying it. That's right. So if your price is 5 and it's 10, you might bump it up to $7 or something like that. It's going to be more realistic long term, unless you're an absolute genius.
Look, I bet to collect off my market. So if I price something 2 to 1 and it's 3 to 1, I'm backing it as though it's a 2 to 1 chance, providing that there's nothing that would make me uncomfortable with that price that I had at 2 to 1. It all depends on the assumptions you've made too, because you might have a price always at 2 to 1 because you think to yourself, well, I could have it 2s or I could have it 5s, depending.
Yeah, 2s with the question mark, absolutely.
2s with the question mark. The market confirms that question mark
whether
is
it be
valid.
First up or whatever, there's a million reasons.
And so you suddenly say, okay, well, I'm now going to put it to market, or I'm not going to back it, or I'm going to reduce my bet, whatever it might be. But if you've got it 2 to 1 and you think I can't possibly mark this any longer, and I'm getting 3 to 1,
and then something's changed to make you more confident, absolutely, even which is possible, whether it be pattern or whatever, absolutely, and everything's confirmed.
So markets are a bit sort of, I suppose what I'm trying to say is that you can't get too fixed on the idea that just because you've got a price, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 5 to 1, whatever, that's it. It can't move. You've got to be nimble enough to be flexible throughout the day and make changes based on what's presented itself.
We could stir up another Twitter gate from Saturday, and it's a great reasoning. Like Brad Davidson.
Yes, I saw that.
He's the sectional king, and no one can knock Brad for his work rate and what he releases, and really does try to engage people, and probably to the extent where people who are more savvy in the game, he drives them a little bit mad at times, but a lot of people want to listen and hear these things, and it's like people that stumble upon our stuff, we might be talking about something that others aren't, and that's kind of how it works on Sky, because a lot of those guys are not scripted, but it's they don't really go into detail of why things should why they like things, whatever, whereas Brad really makes an effort to do that. And obviously releasing bets on a Wednesday, I wouldn't do it unless it was something that I really liked, it's come up the wrong price, and I just want to alert people to say, listen, this is really wrong. You've really got to think you're way in front of the market.
This is my view, anyone who produces a set of probabilities early, 2 days, 3 days, whatever, out from the races,
and releases them in full,
and doesn't change or isn't prepared to make changes,
is MAD.
Is completely mad. I could totally support Brad. In that situation.
Well, you have to, you really do, and I understand they have to release them on a Wednesday, right? So your best bets are released. That's their job. They've got to release it. So, and that's a hard. Well, it is.
Very tough.
But and you asked every one of them, can I change my, it's 120 mils of rain have fallen? Can I change my thing?
But even if there's no rain, what about
one key scratching is all it takes. Wind.
Anything. And suddenly the whole pace shape could change, which changes the dynamic from the riders from the gates. You've got to
even a rider change can make the difference on a whole race.
Yes,
can change a whole race, and that's
or an overweight.
If
a jockey's suddenly a kilo overweight, they can't find a replacement. And, you can.
Oh, there was ones yesterday that went from talking country, like Aaron Bullock's ridden 30 winners in 30 days or something. There's no one going better than him in his area, and someone didn't show up to wherever it was, Kempsey or whatever, and he's copped 3 more rides. It was just from whoever, it didn't matter who it was, an upgrade. You know what I mean? And that changes everything.
It makes a massive change.
And we're talking about something where there's 30 scratchings, heavy track, and someone's had a crack at him for wanting to update his things.
It's not even an argument.
Well, it's insane.
Brad's totally right, and in fact, he's being responsible.
And I was glad, because a lot of people wouldn't have stuck up for themselves, because it's a bit of a tough situation. They obviously work at the same place or overlap a little bit, and he had the balls to stick up for himself, and it was, he really deserves.
We're not talking about the old bloke at the country New South Wales races eating pies and changing his selections before the race.
He deserves
5 minutes before.
He deserves the support that he got.
He does. So yeah, that's a bit of a shame. But anyway, Alex, just finalising that. I hope we've dealt with this in more detail. I change it. It's not always 4% for me. It's, as I said, it's probably anywhere between 2.
I've had 400% myself before. Was that 4 times what you've actually got? Yeah, I've had that in the past, but I wouldn't recommend it.
We're not talking about the early days.
I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah.
But look, I mean, certainly there's a massive difference between betting to collect versus betting to win a certain amount.
Long story short, I think it doesn't matter what you're betting on. It's all about your perceived edge is consistency, and it doesn't matter what the board
So
is.
next one's from Anthony, who's a good man that uses Axis. He's talking about he currently doesn't complete post-race meeting reviews, other than labelling what he thinks is a perceived bias for the day, and he spends more time on focusing on the form for an upcoming race. And what he wants to do is really know, I suppose, what do we look for, or how would we recommend he undertakes a post-race analysis process, or develops a process.
I do know. You can go first.
Well, look, okay, so there's a couple of things. So, Anthony, you get my ratings. So my ratings, I've done a lot of that work anyway. I'm not trying to rate every horse. I'm trying to rate the quality of the race, and I'm using a whole range of factors, time, sectionals, and other things to settle on a number.
Yep.
Of what I think best fits.
Yeah. So when I was taught to do it at Big Syndicate or whatever, you've got to find the quality of the race, the pace of the race,
you
and
got to understand all those things.
That's right. So you don't give them the bias, but you give them basically the quality and the pace of the race.
Yeah, I don't say, well, this horse was checked and 3 wide, and so it deserves a bonus or a markup. That's their subjective things.
No.
But I'm essentially providing the race quality, which gives you an incredible head start in terms of post-race work.
Yeah, the 2 things that I use mainly from your whole system are the race quality, which I've found is really stacked up. Like, there's no reason for me to want to go and do it myself, and the pace of the races. They're the 2 absolute time-saving key things.
And look, you can see it at a glance.
And the other thing, bias, you can't really. You could provide your opinion, but it's an opinion.
Subjective.
That's right. So the 2 things that you're. No,
it's perhaps it's still perhaps a valuable contributor to whatever my edge is.
Whereby you can learn to do.
Yes,
you provide your own race qualities. It's not easy. It involves times, margin sections, things like that. Going back through, looking at the races, it's really time consuming if you want to do it well.
I can tell you, it takes me 7 days a week, pretty much 6 to 7 days a week. That I'm doing it. I mean, sometimes I miss a day, but generally 6 to 7 days, and I would spend from about 5:30 in the morning till around about 9:30, 10 o'clock sometimes. It's a lot of work when you're rating lots of meetings.
Yes, that's right. So even if you want to do one area, I used to do, I think it was 8 meetings for Jelco or whatever. I think it was pace and bias and video watching.
And how long would that take you? About
you're allowed that. So that was a full-time job, 8 hours. So that's 40 hours for 8 meetings.
Okay, 5
so
hours.
If you're doing, and that's all you're doing is pace and bias and reviewing the race. So
and video commentary.
That's not realistic for anyone who even wanted to do just New South Wales to be able to do that. So you need to find someone to help.
Yeah, you need to find someone to help.
But if you want to do your own bias, the way I think I was easily, or the cheap way to do it is to get the results, go back through, look where the favoured runners are, so SP favourites, look where they were in the run. Did certain favourites or favoured runners fail in certain areas of the track? Possibly were other things that SP longer perform above their expectation in certain parts of the track. Obviously, wind and thing. If you're documenting it, wind and things are very important.
We might deal with bias as a separate topic, because that's almost a whole segment that we.
Well, it is, and that's like what he's saying. So if you can somehow find the pace. And the pace of the race and the race quality, you've got a huge advantage. Yep. But determining bias is basically where if you've covered the race pre-race, it's obviously easier, because if a horse is sat in a position and hasn't run up to what you thought, and then again something does it, another one does it, it's usually a bias that's caused that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's basically what you're doing. You're going back and trying to review the meeting and say, everyone thought this thing they should run 1, 2, 3 in this order. Was there something that happened to them in the run that hurt them, or was it maybe their position in running?
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
you add it all up
in terms of lane and or position.
Yeah.
Relative to what's going on in the race.
Yes.
As far as
So something could have just got checked or whatever. If it hasn't, if everything's just happened standard, they've run. No, there's no pace involvement in the race. They've run even time the whole way, and 2 or 3 favourites have sat hard rail in the run and stayed rail and have failed. Big chance the rail's off. If 350 to 1 chances come down the outside and run big races, 1, 2, 3 of the race, whatever. There's a big chance down the outside. So it all shows up pretty well.
If you want to, like the pace side of it, you don't need to deal with because it's already there. The race quality's already been done.
That's from you.
The fact that you're dealing with bias. I think that's a great thing. I think that's a good layer to add.
Because it's subjective. And if you can get good at it, especially if you can get good at it live. So go back, practice on old meetings, and then start looking for the same thing early in the race. Well, you can do that to get your pace and thing, and then you've still got to overlay it with how you expect things to run, and if they're not performing that to expectations early in a meeting, you can get a live advantage as well as post race.
What I'm probably going to say in summary is, good idea that you're doing your bias, Anthony. Keep focusing on the pre-race work, the post-race work, the hard yards has been done by me anyway.
For him it has. For people who haven't got your system, it's a little bit more difficult, time-consuming. They'd have to find. I couldn't think of anyone who's not doing it full time that would have the time to do it. To be honest,
you'd either have to focus on a very small area. Like you might say, okay, all I'm going to do is North Queensland, so I'm only going to do Rocky, Mackay and Townsville. I'll forget about
especially
Cairns.
To start with.
I'll just get to know this group of horses. There's a couple of meetings a week, whatever it is. Just do those properly, both pre-race and post-race. Or you might say, well, all I'm going to do is Sydney Metro.
The beauty of Metro is you've got such detailed sectionals, history of times, things, and that you can go back and compare against track conditions, similar track conditions, you can drag a lot more information for metropolitan meetings than you can for country, provincial, or sort of localised areas. But
if you're going to do a big area like Victoria or
you need help,
or New South Wales, and you're trying to cover a fair bit of the geographical content that's available, you're going to need help. Okay.
Yeah, it's a good question.
So last week's questions. Thanks for that, Anthony. Last week's questions. Ross had the first one about the biggest 1 or 2 things that turn a favourite into a force favourite.
I think we covered that really well because we had that. What was it, Rohiran or whatever? That really was a great example, and that probably.
We don't need to go into that.
No.
Jake wanted to know how big a betting bank you need to make the transition to full-time punting. We talked about basically just recapping. How many times you can turn over your bank is you need to know. So you might say, okay, if I'm having 20 bets a week and I'm betting an average of 1% of my bank, that's 20% of my bank a week. I'm turning it over every 5 weeks, which means I'm turning it over 10 times a year. If your bank's 50 grand, you've turned over 500. If your edge over the market's 10%, you've made 50 on average. Well, that's your expected profit.
Yes.
So you can try
and
to
always be
variations to that,
and always be unders in your projections than overs. If you've had a month where you've made 30%, don't be budgeting for 30%. That was the only real.
I can tell you now, if you're making double figures, you're doing incredibly well.
You're doing well, but never budget for the high end of what you. And even if you've you've made 5%, but you've had a lot of photo finishes, and you think you could have done better for the month.
If you're having 20 bets plus a week, and you're making double figures, come to me and I'll give you a job.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so I think we pretty much covered that.
Yep.
One thing that we didn't cover properly was Michael's question, who's another good man with
another
access.
Good client, another good client.
So g'day, Michael. With other things being all other things being equal, which is obviously impossible, conditions are constantly changing. How much weight do you put on the most recent start versus second last start of a horse? We briefly talked about that, and we said, for me, recency is very much weighted heavily in my approach. So I'm looking for if I can use the last.
It's far
start,
more real.
Yeah, it's far more real. If I can use the last start, I will. Maybe go back to the second last start if I think the last start was below par, but I think there was a valid excuse.
Yep.
And that might have been supported by the horse starting, well, you know, hard in the market.
Yeah.
Then I'm much more inclined to forgive the run.
Yes.
If I think there is a genuine reason why, and if so, I might revert back to that, you know, second last start rating. Once again, assuming that.
Yeah, and especially if it's come out of a strong race too. There's plenty of reasons.
There's lots of different reasons
to
forgive horses.
And it's quite obvious, I think, to me, looking at it, if a horse has an excuse, I'm not talking about a horse that's in a back marker that runs up backsides, like a horse has a genuine like bias or pace excuse, 2 or 3 runs in a row, the market seems to really be unforgiving the further back it is. So
yes,
the last run,
ones you could really
it can be overplayed.
Yeah.
2, it can be underplayed slightly. 3 in a row, which does happen.
Well, we
can be massive.
We might be finding a horse first up, and it was expected to perform first up and do something. It didn't. There were excuses. Second up, they're forgiven the first up run.
Yeah.
It started well in the market again, totally unsuitable or excuses. And that third up,
nearly
fourth up run, they're almost penned.
Yeah.
And sometimes they can provide really good value bets.
100%.
Especially on horses that are perhaps more lightly raced and have more scope, or the bottom hasn't been tapped.
Yeah, and they don't know, like, exactly, I know what you're saying. Sort of horse 20, 30 starts in, they know everything about the horse.
Yeah.
And even its most recent form, sometimes forgotten because they've got such a good profile on the horse that it doesn't get away from you. But lightly raced horses, definitely you can,
So you're on the right track, Michael.
Yes.
Definitely recency in form is more valuable, I think.
100%.
Okay, so the next part of your question was, does this have equal weight when going from the last start, preparation, I presume he means at the last run of the preparation, into the first start, new prep, and does it differ from fillies, mares, colts, geldings? Okay, I've always worked on the belief that if a horse goes out really well, it's more likely to come back well. That's just something that I've worked on.
I think it definitely...
And I think it makes sense.
It definitely makes sense, and it definitely is not a negative if they go out on top of whether it be confidence, whether it be they've not obviously unlikely had an issue.
And it depends on the length of the spell too, right?
So exactly. 365 days spell off a win is an issue.
Story,
But
a fresh
I don't think that hurts.
Or a short spell. I think that does make a difference. Fillies and mares, colts, geldings. Look, there's lots of theories about different things.
One thing really important, I think, if you've like a horse has only had one start and chucked out, that's nearly a complete forgive, reset. Like a lot of the trainers will run them shin sore, they'll run them whatever. They just want to give the horse an experience. They don't expect anything from that horse that first start. They're just really sort of toughening the horse is probably the best way to put it, and spat it back out and know that the horse needs time.
And the good trainers
just forget that.
Will do that more often.
They will, and if it hasn't trialled, be very wary of betting with that horse.
And the jockey?
Yeah, exactly. Any sort of positive engagement, even if it's debuted at, like Sydney people say, so Gosford, so provincial level, and all of a sudden it's popping up at a little bit better level than that, that's a giver. Anything, you just be very wary of those horses, and betting late, very wary of those horses. If they've trialled and they trial up well, even though they've not performed well in the past, I'd be treating the trial more as its recent form than its previous run. Any like lightly raced horses, those sort of last start prep to next prep is very important.
Fillies, mares, colts, geldings. Look, for me, it makes no difference. I'm rating off the winner and the quality of the race. I don't go, well, this is a fillies and mares.
I don't pay any attention to whether a horse is first up, what it is.
The only thing I will do is say that horses, I've noticed, and perhaps you might adopt this, if you've got a young filly and she's suddenly stepping up in trip, and she's maybe on an inside gate and she's got the blinkers on, I don't like that. I've just noticed that a lot of them over race. I don't know what they seem to be more inclined to be more flighty, perhaps, when they're closeted up. They're up in distance, so they're naturally finding a more forward position. They've got the blinkers on.
Yeah, that's right. They're keen to go. They're being taught to keen.
And they can over race. I mean, look, you'd have to sort of do your own homework on that, but that might be about one of the only things I think of.
And I would say that age is more important than sex, because say a 2 to 3 year old, you can expect possible more improvement than 3 to 4, 4 to 5. That's going to lessen off. So I would say less worry about. The only thing I like of interest is fillies and mares, especially as 2-year-olds, are usually quicker to develop, but for whatever reason. It's like proven that the girls are quicker to develop as 2-year-olds, so they might not improve as much as a colt or gelding possibly could from 2 to 3, and that's usually the biggest. Sort of after their first run to their second preparation, that they usually make their biggest spike if they're going to make one in physical improvement, and that's something probably more to look at, and then you could cut it back. Like that's it. You could expect less from a 2-year-old filly to 3-year-old filly, but a colt can really make a good jump from an ordinary prep to a good second preparation.
Yeah, very cool. And the last part of Michael's question is, what are our thoughts on the market, and do we think the market overplays the horse's last start? Look, I think
kind of covered that, yeah.
I think we've sort of kind of covered that. There's always going to be exceptions, and there's always going to be situations where the market might overplay the last start, and often that can be, in terms of early markets. There's different types of horses, the big flashing light horse.
Well, the Dana's probably a good example of what we were talking about. So it's a horse that's run up the backside of him how many times. It's sort of got a bit of the reputation as a horse that finds trouble.
So early in the betting, those horses tend to find friends.
Yeah.
But late in the betting, when the big teams are playing, you know that's not.
Yeah, but sort of in this case on Saturday, he'd come off a luckless run first up, but he'd had so many last prep, they probably overplayed him first up.
Yep.
And then they've had enough of him after that and thought, well, this is just a horse that's fine that trouble. Even though he found a suitable race Saturday, he got out from your 2 to 3 to 1 late because it wasn't sort of the recent, they just sort of had enough of 3 or 4 runs in a row where he'd been unlucky, and you got a bit of value about him. It's easy to say that now because he's won, but that's kind of the point, that over the last run, if that was his first time that he'd been unlucky, and I think that he would have started 6 to 4 favourite Saturday, but because he'd done it a few times, the market had enough of him a bit, and he got out late rather than firmed, and that happens a lot with runners. So that if they're unlucky for the first time, and it's visually very easy to pick up, and strong race and everything sort of that everyone looks at, they're usually overplayed at that next run.
Yeah,
at that next run.
But I mean, there is also a difference then. Are they overplayed at that next run early, or is that early move then supported by another move late?
Which usually means it's real. That's right.
Which usually means it's real.
Yeah.
When you see that early support come for a runner like that, and then late they push back quite strongly.
Yeah,
they're ones that you might have to just rethink and just go. Well,
it's actually a very, very good point that the early move on that sort of horse is completely
different to the late.
Yes, yeah. You're not going to say irrelevant because it's not irrelevant, but if it's not supported by the late market, then usually if it drifts back a little bit, I wouldn't be worried because of how bad.
We're talking about a significant premium.
Well, the way that these robots go crazy, like it's, you never know what's behind a significant shift and where the actual level is. So say it goes 8 to 4, comes back to 5 or 6, that's not really too scary a shift. If it goes back beyond the 8 or to the 8, you're starting to worry. I think because the markets are so volatile early now too, that the amount of the shift late, if it's sort of, you've got to expand your parameters a bit more than what you once might have, and obviously city a little bit less than the city markets are going to be more solid and correct the whole way through than provincial country markets that are really volatile. They go crazy.
Well, there's probably less interest.
There is less interest, less turnover, and they obviously they overreact a lot more to smaller money on the country provincial markets because they don't hold what they do in the city, so they're not going to absorb as much too. So, which makes sense from everyone's point of view. So the market's really important. It's just the stage of the market's probably what you've got to take notice of. Yeah, factor in. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that covers Michael. That's all for this week. I suppose the only other thing we might talk about is the Betfair exchange now in Hong Kong betting.
Yep.
I had a look Sunday. Look, the pools, from
pretty
my
steady.
point of view, I would have liked to have seen more, but I mean, it was only early days. It was the first meeting. There's all sorts.
Well, they did say that they talked about that. There's been so much promotion, and they're like, really, not that much promotion. It's a lot of people. So I wouldn't expect, and it's a first meeting back, like a very difficult meeting to get your head around. Really, a lot of.
Well, I think a lot of the teams probably do go a little soft into those first.
You'd expect them to. That's right, and they're probably all observing a bit themselves too. I'd expect it to be only picking up. I know. I saw that a few people said that it was similar to Singapore. That's got to be a pretty good starting point, really. Even though Hong Kong's a much bigger market, or seen as a much bigger market, it's a good starting point to have it on par with Singapore, and I assume it only grows from there. And
well, I mean, I definitely want to see it grow. I mean, as obviously Betfair do, and the players in the market. But Yeah, I mean, with some growth capability there, certainly it's still an interesting potential move there.
I didn't even get to say last week I wore some stupid shirt. These guys are in a couple of horses with us called the Assorted Punters. They're from Wyong. They're absolutely insane. Josh Parr came out of the room the other day at Wyong after winning the protest in the last. So we're talking 20 minutes, half an hour after the last. Usually at Wyong there'd be 2 men and a dog. And these clowns are sitting outside the steward's room apparently, and he said it was like a Group 1 win when they came out and said protest upheld on an even money favourite. They're absolutely mental, these blokes, and they've been a joy to have in our horses. They're enthusiastic, they're great for racing. I wish there was more like syndicates like them. They're not, they're not the crazy Godolphin side kids out there, not the Golden Spoon kids. They just love racing, and I wish there were more of them. And it was good to, it's great fun to have them involved in a few horses with us.
So if you want to get involved, John, they can contact you.
Yeah, they're not hard to find. They're on Twitter. They're everywhere. I think they're Assorted Punters, and they're only going to grow. And even if it's not them, I just love sort of similar situations where guys, if you've got a group of punters club, cricket club, whatever, like I like buying tried horses and doing things like that, and not expensive to get involved in. They can take small shares. It's more about literally teaming these guys up and getting them at the races and letting them go. They're just so much fun to be involved with. And they are MAD, but in a good way.
Great stuff. You can find John at racingwatch.com.au and myself at ratingstowin.com.au, and we're both on Twitter. The Punters handle, or Punters Academy handle, is at TPAOZ. If you want to send in your questions or topics for discussion for next week's show. Now, next week's show, we may have to just juggle that because John's got some.
I've been talked into playing golf for 3 days, and first up from a spell, it's going to be very ugly. But yeah, I'll be out of play.
He'll be out of play
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So we'll try and find somewhere to do it
if we can next week. Otherwise, definitely the following week.
Yep.
But definitely get those questions in and topics in. Doesn't matter how detailed. Put them on Twitter. Put them on email. All good.
Yep.
See you then.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.